Ao passar pelo ribeiro,
Good afternoon, Meredith.
Good afternoon, Miguel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Oyarzun, and for the next hour, we will all have the privilege to dialogue with Meredith Monk. We would like to first thank all the organization of Fatil Festival for putting together such an incredible program and for organizing this encounter today. If I may, Meredith, I would like to start by sharing with our audience a few short biographical notes on your career. Is that okay?
Yes.
Meredith Monk is a composer, singer, director, choreographer, filmmaker, and creator of new opera, music theatre works, films, and installations. She is recognized as one of the most unique, influential artists of our time. She is a pioneer in what is now called extended vocal technique and interdisciplinary performance. Meredith's work is celebrated internationally and has been presented at major venues throughout the world for over 50 years. Recently, you have received 3 of the highest honors bestowed to a living artist in the United States: induction into the American Academy of Arts and Letters in 2019, the 2017 Dorothy and Lillian Gish Prize, and a 2015 National Medal of Arts from President Barack Obama. You are a pioneer in science-specific work with emblematic works such as Juice, a theatre cantata in 3 installments, or Ascension Variations for the Guggenheim Museum. And among your award-winning films, we can find Ellis Island from 1981, Book of Days, or Quarry, an opera in 3 movements from 1976. Your films, short films, installations, and drawings have been shown in museums and galleries, including 2 Whitney biennials or MoMA's collection. In 1965, Meredith began her innovative exploration of the voice as a multifaceted instrument, composing solo pieces for unaccompanied voice and keyboard. And in 1978, you founded Meredith Monk and Vocal Ensemble to expand the musical textures and forms. You have made more than a dozen recordings, and in addition to your numerous vocal pieces, music theatre works, and operas, you have created vital new repertoire for orchestra, chamber ensembles, solo instruments, with commissions from Carnegie Hall or Kronos Quartet, among others. Your music can also be heard in films by such directors such as Terrence Malick, Jean-Luc Godard, David Byrne, or the Coen brothers. And earlier this year, you released your last album, Memory Game, revisiting some of your previous work. Today, we will be talking in this encounter entitled Meredith Monk, Always a Beginner's Mind. Meredith, hello.
Thank you, Miguel, so much.
It's overwhelming, and I would like to start our conversation.
I'm getting tired just hearing all these things.
I would like to start our conversation by asking you just simply, how are you and how have you been since March when pandemia hit us all globally?
I'm doing okay. Up in the country about, I guess by car, about 3.5 hours northwest of New York City. But I was in my loft alone for 3 months in New York. And I feel it was very, very hard. And there were some days that were, just overwhelming in sadness and the sorrow of so much suffering going on and fear and everything. When the lockdown came, I realized really what was going on, and any of us could just die anonymously in New York and not be allowed into the hospital. It was very intense. But I have to say that strangely enough, it's been a very creative period for me. I've worked very hard on my new work and just to keep the energy going. And also, I'm grateful that I was in New York to experience the reality of what was going on, because up here in the country, it's easy to forget it. I mean, the freedom of being able to go outdoors and not have to put a mask and gloves and everything on is a joy. But a truck is just going by, a huge truck. So that was, feels very healing to not have to do that. Whereas in New York, if I was just going to take the laundry out or the garbage, I would have I call it my plague paraphernalia, everything, covered. So it's a blessing to be here, but I'm very, very glad that I had the experience of being down there. It was very important because, listen, this sense of not knowing what's coming next is something that's true in our lives anyway. It's this unpredictability is our life. That's reality. But now we have the chance to really experience it, because usually we don't think about it. We think everything's sure, everything's secure. But in reality, anything can happen at any moment, and everything's changing all the time.
You briefly touched on your reaction, your creative reaction. In this period of confinement, some artists found new ways to continue sharing their art, and others are still reluctant to create within the digital world. I think in line with the career where you have explored and expanded the limits of art disciplines, as you mentioned, you've been very active, creatively speaking, in the last months. How did you face this period creatively? How have you reacted creatively during the confinement? And please, can you tell us about the process of creation of Anthem, this piece you presented in August 2020?
Well, we have these different choices. One choice is to give up, and one choice is to realize that it's an opportunity as creative people, and I think every human being is creative. It's that each person has to find their own way. But I think that, I did give up for a little while at the beginning. I really did rest and, rest my mind. And I was thinking of it almost like a retreat where it would be more contemplative and have more time. But then I think I started realizing that I was really in the midst of this new work, which is called Indra's Net. Indra's Net refers to Hindu-Buddhist myth about a king, an enlightened king, who built a net over the universe. And at every intersection is a jewel, and that jewel has got infinite numbers of facets or sides, and those sides and facets of the jewels reflect every other infinitely faceted jewel in the universe, meaning that we're all connected, and we reflect on each other, and what we do affects each other. So, and at the same time, I think what's beautiful is each jewel is a little different. It's not like all the jewels are the same. So, I realized that this piece, Indra's Net, that I've been thinking about for the last 10 years, I just felt that when this happened, it just was what I was really trying to work on in the piece anyway, the sense of our connection. And the connection is so important. And so I think my strategy has been to try to keep on working on that piece as much as I can, even when I can't be in rehearsal with the people that I adore, my group, how to do it, how to keep the process going. And so I've been working on the music very hard. And then Alan Pearson, who's the conductor for a young music ensemble, new music ensemble called Alarm Will Sound, got in touch with me and said, we're trying to figure out ways that we can play together. What as musicians can we do during this time? How can we do it? And how can we incorporate what is going on the internet, which at that time we were thinking had a lot of delay, like the Zoom situation is only one person can play at a time. And he said, could you write something for this? And I said, I can't write something new right now because I'm working on this piece, but I think there's one section that might work because the delays are kind of built into the structure of the piece. And then the name of that piece is Anthem. And what I was thinking about was what would it be like to be in a world where we all realize that we're just part of this planet and we don't have boundaries and barriers between countries and cultures. We have our individuality, like each jewel is separate and unique, and we honor those differences, but we all have commonalities as citizens of the earth, of the planet. And what would an anthem be for that everybody could sing? So that was the idea of this piece, just a kind of prayer for the continuation of the planet, really, and I always think of music right now as an antidote to some of the darkness that we're all going through. So that was making me, that really inspired me to keep on working. And also, I think I like the idea that we can use this opportunity to find new ways of doing things. I think artists are always like that. When I first came to New York, I had no money at all. And there's even been times a few years ago where I had no money. I was working on a piece called On Behalf of Nature with zero budget. And so the way that I solved it was I was thinking, well, when I was a young artist, I'd go to the 5 and 10 cent store and go, what could I do with red crepe paper? I know I could figure out, or what can I do with string? Something very simple. So I thought, well, we're good at this, being very scrappy people. And so for On Behalf of Nature, I have a wonderful costume designer who lives in Berlin. He's Japanese. His name is Yosho Yabara. And what we did was we had the cast bring in their old clothes, and then he just took them apart and made these new, amazing sculptural kind of costumes out of everybody's old clothes. So that was an instance of being resilient to a problem, that our minds are very resilient. And so I think this situation at the beginning, I was thinking we need that fluidity and flexibility of our minds to create new ways of doing things. And what I found is doing Anthem was really satisfying in that the computer program Jamulus that allowed us to play and sing together at the same time was amazing, that I could hear everybody and we could actually sing together. But, there's no substitution for the live energy. So, for me, I'm still looking forward to the time that I can be in the room with an audience, that I can be in the room with other performers. I mean, nothing will ever substitute for that. But this was a very touching experience to be able to play together. That was amazing. And for your audience, you can find it on YouTube. It's just Meredith Monk Anthem. I think you can find it on YouTube.
Despite missing the audience and the contact.
I'm sorry?
Missing the audience, the live contact, the physical contact.
Yes.
Sounds like you've found a way to use technology in your favor. And I think your career is defined by a movement of expansion, of trying to stretch the borders and limits of art forms, perhaps weaving them in a poetic way. Is this digital world, this platform, a tool that you are interested in continue exploring?
Maybe. I think the thing that's missing for me is space. And particularly in something like both, actually, Anthem and Quarry, space is a very important element, for me. So much of the music that I'm thinking about for Indra's Net is I can already see how people are placed in space, and the space sings, the space plays itself. So that is something that is missing in this technology, because it's a very flat experience. But what I was hoping for with Anthem, and I'm working on another part of Indra's Net to another, Zoom kind of thing, because that's all we can really do right now, is I was hoping that people would put earphones on and they would just be able to really take in that piece and really use it as comfort, for themselves, that they would just be there for people, like a meditation or like a, immersive, calming kind of healing experience that people could just go to at any time. So I don't know if people are doing that because, there's so much coming in. Everybody's like one Zoom thing after another. So I don't know if people are doing that, but that was what my aspiration was.
You've mentioned Zoom, and then you have also teaching through the screen with groups of over 300 participants on Zoom. And
that was really amazing.
You've been teaching since you were 21, that's right?
Yeah, since I was 20 years old, 21 years old, yeah.
And in preparation to this interview, I've been watching some fascinating videos that one can also find online of your lessons. You define in a way, your work as an act of love, an act of generosity, and that is clearly conveyed in the transmission of your knowledge during your lessons. What are the challenges you have found through this platform in teaching, and what have you rediscovered in this new platform with something you've been doing for such a long time, teaching?
Well, it was a very interesting thing, an interesting problem to think about in terms of the screen. People at their homes, maybe people not having a lot of room to move, and how to make a class that was inclusive of anyone that would want to join the class. So someone who's 85 years old and would take the class sitting down, a young person in their teens, people that would never sang or moved in their lives, and people that want to be professional singers and dancers and actors. So how do I make a class that incorporates all that feels comfortable? And also I think that this time, it's a great opportunity to just affirm human nature and make an opportunity for people to just feel good about their bodies and their voices in this time, just as a way to keep the energy flowing. Because I think one of the hardest things is that everybody's sitting down all the time, with the computer. So how to integrate that into people's lives. And, it's not necessarily like a class that would be, somebody who wants to be a professional singer would necessarily be that challenged by in that very technical kind of way, because I think it's much more interesting to open it up to everybody. But some of the great performers that I've known that have taken our classes, just to be able to simplify like that and to, work from the most essential part of themselves in a very selfless kind of way, it usually does a lot for someone who's also very technically accomplished. Because it's always good to go back to the beginning, back to the essence. So that was the thing, how to do that, for all those different people. And what was great was at the end of the class, so during the class, I could only see 5 people, but that was helpful to know that they were finished with the exercise or not. And what we do is, which I found, also I was teaching at Harvard University in the spring, and it was a choral music class. So that was very challenging because they can't sing together, and they had signed up for a choral music class. So we had to do one voice at a time. So we worked a lot on making a melody, and that was passed on to the next person. It's a very linear situation in Zoom. You can't hear 2 people at the same time. But I had to figure out ways to, for example, sing something and then everybody sang it back to me in this Zoom class. So what we did mostly, and the members of my ensemble were also teaching classes all the way through from March through July, and just as a way of giving something to the community. So everybody mutes, and then the person who's teaching, you hear them, and then they can sing along with us. And I took somebody else's class, and it felt great. It feels very, it's wonderful because there's no pressure. You're at home and you're just singing along with the person, and it's very pleasurable. So we're going to continue doing them.
You mentioned going to the essence, and we're talking about adapting, about interconnecting, about expanding the limits. these are all elements that define your work. And on Wednesday, when we had our first chat, you were telling me how Western society values specialization, but it's not the same in other places.
Yes. I think that the Western European tradition is the only one that separates the art forms, and people become specialists in those art forms. And there's a belief system that if you do more than one art form, you don't do them well. Whereas if you think about something like African culture, Asian theater forms, accounts of early performance, in ancient times, actually the more forms that one person has in their body, the more honored they are. And it's this integration of these things. How does the voice affect the body? How does the body affect the acting? How does the acting affect the singing? It's like, it's a fluid kind of situation. I was saying the other day when we were talking something like kabuki performers, like they are actors, they are singers, they are acrobats, some of them, they are dancers. And within one piece, they will move fluidly from one form to another. That's so beautiful to me, because it's also, you're using all your resources as a person, you're using all your senses and your perceptions, and you're also giving something to your audience that also uses all their perceptual apparati. To me, it's an affirmation of the richness that all of us have as human beings. And I think that I've always been very interested in the sense of inclusion and expansion.
We circle around the title of this encounter, which is always with the beginner's mind. Can you tell us where does this quote come from and how it influences your work?
Yes. Well, it comes, and I actually have the quote. I'm going to read the quote. It comes from a wonderful Zen Buddhist teacher, Suzuki Roshi, a Japanese man who came to the United States, I guess in the earlier mid 1960s, and really started teaching Zen practice in San Francisco. He founded the San Francisco Zen Center and the Tassajara Retreat Center. I come from the Tibetan Buddhist lineage. That's my practice, so it's quite different, but I have such love for the Zen practice. And so this is his quote, which is so beautiful. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. And the way I interpret that is that if you are, and also in terms of the way I feel like I've lived my life, if you already know what you're going to do, then why do it? I feel like I've lived a life of curiosity. I love finding and I love discovery. That's what keeps me going from one day to the next. And I feel that when I start a new work, I want to go in there with no assumptions. So that's the past, like assumption would be the past, and no expectation, that would be the future. And just be present and try to be open for what's coming in with, nothing that's as little baggage as possible on your back. Now, I'm not going to say that that's not terrifying. Every time I'm scared to death when I start a new piece, and I say to myself, you've been working over 50 years and you're still afraid of a new piece. But I think that's what's very interesting, is that that's the risk that you take of trying to find something new. And then you're a little bit like a detective. You get one clue. Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting sound. I've never worked on that one before. And I don't think I've ever heard that one before. Let's see where that leads. And then once that happens, you realize you're on the path, and the fear turns into curiosity and interest and actually excitement along the way. So that's the process. And you have to learn how to tolerate your fear, the fear and the discomfort of being in the unknown. And there we are in the time that we're living in. That's like a little metaphor, like, being an artist and making work is a little metaphor for the world that we're all living in. And I always say that, it doesn't matter if, it doesn't have to be that the creativity and the love is manifest as art. It can manifest as a beautiful pie, or a very caring afternoon with somebody, or what else would I say? A very nice garden, but it doesn't matter how it manifests, but it's that the impulse comes from love and being open.
Earlier this year, in March, at the beginning of the pandemic, you released Memory Game, which is an extraordinary album that revisits some of your earlier work, such as the album Do You Be or the opera The Games. Now, with a 50-year career behind your back, how do you revisit your past, your earlier work, with a beginner's mind? Is it a way to continue learning who you are or a way to rediscover yourself, your practice?
Well, as performing artists, it's very hard to review what we've done over the years. When you're a painter, you can take out your paintings and you see how you've grown or what direction you've gone in. And as a writer, performing artists, it's a little bit more difficult because it just goes out into the air. And the only way that you really can have a deep understanding of what you did, because, even a videotape of a performance is a secondary source. So to really feel what you were doing and feel the difference between what you were doing at a certain point and where you are now is to mount the piece. So what happened with Memory Game was I had been working for many years on and off with Bang and Can All Stars. Not that often, but over the years we've had wonderful times where we went on tour together, and I really love these musicians. They're just wonderful. And so we've been talking for many years about maybe making an album, and I was trying to find material for the album because, I was going to orchestrate. It's a 6-member instrumental group, and what came up was some music from the games that I had never recorded before. The other responsibility that I was feeling very deeply is that I've been working for 40 years recording for ECM label, which is a wonderful label, Manfred Eicher, who I have the deepest love and respect for, and I love recording with him. And so I just wanted to find things that were old pieces, so probably I would not be able to get a chance to record that with him because we usually record what I'm working on now. And then also the idea of maybe orchestrating some of these pieces, actually changing the forms a little bit. So in a way, it's like recycling, but spiraling ahead, like creating something new from something old. In a sense, it's kind of recycling. So that was really interesting because I feel that some of that music is really, the instrumental aspect is so beautiful. It really added a lot to it. And then the other thing that made me choose some of that music was what's going on now, because a lot of my thinking is about cycles. And certainly Quarry was about the same cycle that's coming up now. And so was the games about dictatorship, you could say fascism, what's the vocabulary of fascism? What is the movement vocabulary of fascism? What's the vocal vocabulary of fascism? And the patriarchy and all these kinds of impulses that are coming up again now. It just seemed really interesting to bring that music back out. And also to see the difference between that time, which the other day I was telling you was I consider my apocalyptic period. It's like stating the problem. And then at a certain point after that, towards the beginning of the 90s, I realized, that's very valuable and very important, particularly if you're a verbal artist, if you're like a person that works in words. I'm thinking of someone like Brecht, who could analyze like a political situation and, give thought for, what was going on. But I'm more a poet and I'm a nonverbal artist, a musician. And so from that point on, I really started thinking about offering what I would call alternative human behavioral situations. So that there's another way to live and that there's another way to treat each other. And I think that that's what my work is about now. So it's quite different. So looking back at that album, it was sort of strange. And in the games, there was the end of the games was a kind of, there was a redemption to the darkness of the games. There was an image of a man in medieval, like a medieval cloak, like a cape, who was playing the bagpipe, and he was just walking slowly upstage. And it was a sense that at all time, we have the sense of that light can come in and there's a way of renewing and getting through these very dark periods. And so that I was not able to include on the album because it was another one that I had already recorded with ECM. But the pieces that I added at the end of that album, I tried to make them be something that did have a feeling of redemption, you know, that changed the emotion to something of hope and possibility.
Well, about solo pieces, but also with great ensembles. You often work on a piece for a long time on your own, and then you search for that enriching encounter with other creators. Is that openness that we're speaking about something that you have transported into the way you collaborate with other artists? How do you face a creative process when you collaborate with other creators?
Well, there's different degrees of collaboration. There are two pieces that I can think of that it was a straight collaboration right from the beginning, you know, conceptually. The games was one of them. I collaborated with Ping Chong. And another one was called Mercy. I collaborated with a wonderful visual artist, Ann Hamilton. So those were really, I would say those were real collaborations where we had to figure out, in a way, a good collaboration is that you figure out who is in charge of what, particularly if both people work on you know, in their own work on all the elements. So who is going to do the video? Who is going to work on the sound? I mean, with Ann Hamilton, obviously I was going to do the music. She did the video, which was interesting because I just was interested to see what someone else was going to do. Ping is a marvelous theater and performance director and also came from a visual background. So he, in the games, did a lot of the media work and the text. He did a lot of the text. I did the music, the movement, and, you know, and also worked a little bit on some of the text and the concept. But the way that I work with my group is that I usually spend a long time working alone. So months or years. And then there's a certain point where it's time to rehearse. And I feel like I come into the rehearsal with my materials in my hands, like as if I were a sculptor or a painter. I have the paint vocabulary or color scheme that I'm working, and sketches of a lot of the music, sketches of the ideas. And then what I love, and this is again the live performance, is all these people are so remarkable that I work with. They're remarkable artists, extraordinary performers, and very creative people. And we've been working together for so many years that they understand my vocabulary and they understand the way that I work. And so I come into rehearsal and then we just take the material and then I tried all different ways, you know, using that, using this, let's try it the other way, let's do this, let's do that. And then if they might have an insight about something, and I you know, really try to stay open to their insights because, you know, it might be seeing it in a different way than I would have thought in the first place. Ultimately, I make the decisions because the vision of the work comes from, you know, wherever it comes from, but it comes from, you know, in a sense, my working alone. And so after maybe the first rehearsal period of working with them, then I'll go back and work alone and revise, and then again work with them. So it's a very pleasurable give and take, and I miss it so much. You know, that's what I miss so much during this pandemic. I miss just all of us in one room. We were right in the middle of the process of working on Indra's Net with a wonderful group, a fantastic group, and hard, you know, but trying to figure out ways to keep it going. That's what I'm doing.
Just before we come back to the ensemble work, you mentioned something that is fascinating to me, and it relates to the work you've done with voice. You talk about sculpting, and I think you've particularly expanded the limits of the work with voice, because you understand the voice as a body, as something you can sculpt.
Absolutely.
The voice as a language itself, language that goes beyond languages such as English or Spanish, a language that provides us with a more abstract way of communicating and that actually can speak to everyone.
Yes, that's has always been my hope and my wish. And I was thinking when you were talking about sculpting, and you can also sculpt time. Time and space can be sculpted. Like I always think of time in my work as very sculptural. Like I can stretch it, I can compress it. It can be divided in different ways. It can be the forms can be cyclical. They can be fragmentary. There's so many ways of sculpting different elements. But with the voice, it's more that in the mid '60s when I had a day that I had a revelation that the voice could be an instrument and that we did not need words. And I think that also came from the fact that I wasn't only trained as a singer, but also as a mover, as a dancer. And so one trusts nonverbal communication coming from the body. So I realized how powerful the instrument was without text. And as much as I really have so much respect for people that do this beautiful prosody of putting text and music together, I mean, that's a beautiful skill, and something that is to be honored. I think not working with so much text over the years has allowed us to go all over the world and to reach people very directly, where they didn't have to go through the filter of language. They could go right to the direct source of the heart, and energy. So that's been a wonderful privilege to be able to go to so many different countries in my lifetime.
Back to you have created really your collaboration with other creators.
I think you're breaking up, Miguel, a little bit. I'm having trouble hearing you. Sorry. Try again. Okay, yeah.
I was just saying that you've been collaborating with people over the years, and you collaborate with other creators repeatedly. The way in which you choose the people you collaborate with in your ensembles is really far from ordinary, because there are artists, musicians, performers from very diverse backgrounds and countries, origins. A practice that now is more and more common, but that you've been doing for decades. Can you tell us about how you create your ensembles and what you look for?
Well, I've always been really interested in the sense of inclusion, like all ages, all backgrounds, all sizes and shapes, all races, all ethnic backgrounds. I mean, I've always wanted a very inclusive kind of world, which I guess is reflective of the kind of world that I would like to live in. And then it's always a matter of each person being unique. So, and then it's balancing these beautiful, unique people. What is a good balance of the people? So it's like the combination of the uniqueness and the balance and the inclusion that has shaped the ensembles that I've chosen. And also, there was one point where I had to audition, which was for my opera Atlas that I did at the Houston Grand Opera. And usually in the opera world, the auditions, people come in and they sing arias. They're all dressed up and they come and sing arias. But I knew that was not going to work for me. So I had big workshops of maybe 40 people at a time. And the audition process I always find very painful, because people have to be there like 5 minutes and, and then you just make a judgment on that. And I think it's very painful. So I like to do, give them a workshop where they can leave the audition also feeling very good about themselves. And even if they're not chosen for the work, that they've gotten something out of the audition. So that's the way that I've chosen people over the years. In the very early days, it was much more intuitive, like people just showed up in my life. I mean, I never auditioned. It was just one of those crazy things. This person would just be at my door, or, it just was, I don't know. It was very intuitive. But there have been a few times where I had to audition, but I tried to stay with that same sense of, as I say, giving something back. And then in a also a strange way is that people start bonding in the audition and then they stay in touch with each other. That's also happened. It's a very lovely, intimate process.
And you collaborate over you're looking creation of a common language. Is that right?
I'm sorry.
The process of creating that language.
That is a very personal thing. I wouldn't say that that's a collaboration, really. That's me spending a lot of time alone, finding the particular sound vocabulary for each song or each section. I always think of each of my pieces as a world in itself, and that world has got its own laws that I have to follow, principles, and also sound dimension. And so that exploration I usually work on by myself. And then come in to rehearsal, and I will usually bring recordings of me performing. What I do is I work on a multi-track tape recorder and I lay the parts down myself so that people can hear the counterpoint. And then there's one member of my ensemble, Allison Sniffen, who's a wonderful notator. And so she's able to sometimes analyze, almost all the time, to be able to notate it, even though some pieces are almost impossible to notate. But she can at least get it that we can sort of figure it out, how I can teach it to the other people.
We're talking about working with others, but due to the financial crisis in 2008 and now with measures of confinement and the pandemic, artists are thrown to creating solo work. In the past, you've expressed that your piece 16mm earrings, made in 1966, that was turned into your first film, marked your career. A solo piece. It's a solo piece where you wrote the vocal score, weaving text, music, movement, projection, live music, and all performed by yourself. There might be creators listening to this conversation, so what are the biggest challenges when creating a solo, and would you make us any recommendations when facing such a work?
Well, I always think the solo form is the most difficult form. And at the same time, the beauty of the solo form is that you're seeing one person, their essence. So, for example, if I'm doing a solo vocal concert, I feel completely satisfied that every part of my being is represented in just that solo vocal concert. The larger works have other elements that are added, and it's a different experience. It's more, large, expansive, immersive kind of experience. The solo is much more concentrated. But I always feel that it's a complete representation of my way of thinking about things. And so solo form is very beautiful, but it is very, very challenging. And part of it is that I think that if a young person is working on solo now, my suggestion is always to have an outside eye, because you need to have that person that's mirroring what you're doing, because you can get so caught up in your own expression that you're not thinking objectively, like about form, for example. So one thing that was nice about 16mm earrings is that it worked out. I was saying to you, Miguel, it was a little like Alfred Hitchcock. I had it worked out to the minute. It was sort of performing. It was like kind of boring. 'Cause I had it all worked out before. So that in those days, I did not have an outside eye, but I was the outside eye. You know, it was sort of like my lens was pulled back, looking at that whole structure. But I think that that's very important, because with the solo form, you know, you need that mirror. You know, you need someone to say, you know, that section's too long. It might feel great to you, but it's not conveying really what you want to convey to an audience. And it's always this thing, I think, in being an artist, that I always think is a kind of combination of rigor and discipline and freedom. So, you know, that, and they have to balance. The rigor and the discipline is very important, but also the freedom and, what would I say, expression, or, you know, the ability to be in the moment, the ability to make a form that also allows for you to play in the moment and explore. Those two combinations, you know, that combination of things is very important. So for the solo form, I think my advice would be to have someone look at it, you know, and you can listen to what someone says. You don't have to agree with everything, but you at least think about, especially if it's a person that you trust, think about what they're telling you. That would be my advice.
And
in a way, they are the mirror of the audience. That person. Is that what you just said? I'm having so much trouble with hearing your sound. I'm so sorry.
Do you hear me better now?
It kind of goes in and out.
I was just asking, can the audience be that mirror, and has the reaction of the audience influence your work, and can, now that the relationship with the audience is so distant, influence in the same way the work of an artist?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, in a live performance, the way that I always feel about the relationship, which I think is such a beautiful relationship, is I always picture it like an infinity sign. It's an infinity sign. So it's going like this, like figure eight. And we're sending out this energy, and it's going to the audience, and then they're receiving it, and then they're sending it back to us, and we're receiving it, and then we're sending it back to them, and they're receiving it. So it's just going like this. And it's such a beautiful relationship, you know, and that's the thing that I think can never really occur on the screen. It's different. You have to think in different terms. That's why I said, like, for Anthem, I was thinking more, okay, a person's at home alone, so I, as a performer, I'm not going to get that energy back, but I'm offering a different kind of experience. I'm trying to find a form that's going to allow them to have their experience in solitude, so to speak, you know, as a secondary experience, but something that hopefully is very alive. And that was the thing that the Jamulus program on the computer allowed us, at least, to play together and sing together, so that, for example, we did 3 takes of Anthem, and there was one that just had that kind of magic. It's more like being in a recording studio, you know, like one had the magic, and we knew, and you could feel it. So then that's the one that we're going to pass on to these human beings that are basically alone, and hopefully that they will be able to share in that experience. So, and again, have a different kind of figure eight. But it's not going to influence us as much, because we're not getting that feedback back. You know, for me, what's been moving to me is that people have written me or said that they did get this experience of Anthem that moved them. So that, you know, to me, that's very satisfying, that some of the aspiration of what I was trying to do got through. Because I think, again, this is totally new. We don't know, you know, how this is going to affect anybody, you know, at all. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. And you pointed out that these are uncertain times, in particular for artists. How do you see the situation for artists in the United States post-pandemic?
Oh, I feel like I'm Cassandra. I'm going to prophesy. Well, what I would hope is that that the live situation does come back. That I think is very important. What I will say that's interesting to me right now, working with Indra's Net, is that in my early work, in my early site-specific work, I worked a lot with audiences moving around, and the performers actually being still in still places, and the audience moved around. Lots of different kinds of structures like that. And for Indra's Net, I was feeling already before the pandemic that I wanted to have an audience that could change configuration, and that the piece would be in a big warehouse or a big large space, and that there'd be these different relationships, and that the audience could even walk through, and maybe all the orchestra was in different little groups, and you could walk and listen to what they were playing really closely, or you could also hear the overall composition. So I was already thinking in those terms. And I think that in one way, what's interesting about the pandemic is it does open up your mind to just be really inventive, and don't think like, okay, now we're going to go back and it's got to be back in a proscenium stage, and now we're back in the opera house, or, that don't think, well, it's only just going to be that. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. And I hope that it does go back to that. But maybe there are these other ways that we can think about what a performance ritual is like in a different kind of situation, because this time that we're in is allowing our minds to go into, well, what would it be like to do this, or what would it be like to do that? And I think that it does open some other creative possibilities. But my hope is that the live situation, which I think is something that is so important to affirm, because it is the live thing of a community of people being together and experiencing something together and having energy be conveyed and passed along with real energy. I think it's something to fight for. And, one can already have seen before this even happened how people are much more interested in, seeing movies on the screen, or, staying at home and with a computer and all that. That was happening before the pandemic. That wasn't anything new. But I think that, and maybe it's too much trouble, like to go to and be with all these other people, who are eating too much popcorn, or, all those crazy things that were already happening before this pandemic started. I have always felt that, even if I'm a dinosaur and I'm fighting for this live situation to the bitter end, there's nothing that substitutes for it. What have we got as a kind of spiritual experience, of sharing energy together, of sharing an experience together? To me, that is a kind of soul-filling experience, and I would hope that would go on. That would be my wish, please.
We are about to finish our conversation, which has been wonderful. Thank you so much. And to do that, I'd like to go back to something you've mentioned in the middle of the conversation about the relationship between art and politics, and how art can contribute to change in a moment of change like we're living, and with situations that hit us and to which we cannot look away, like Black Lives Matters. How can art contribute to change? And how do you see your work contributing to change?
Well, I think that there's two main branches of responding to a world that we're living in now, and that's been going on for a while. One is a direct kind of political art, and that really illuminates people's experiences and conveys maybe experiences that other people have never known about or have not been aware about, and really pass on the reality and the truth of people that maybe have not been represented properly, in the world in a balanced way. So I think that work is very, very important. Sometimes I feel that, and it depends on the work, people have all different ways of expressing their experience. I think it still has to be good art, whatever that might mean, but, carefully considered, I would say, would be what my standard would be, carefully considered. And I think maybe the only weakness in that way of thinking about things might be that when you have an experience like that, sometimes one does not know what to do with it, and then is there a way to work on it or think about it? And hopefully the work would be, what would I say, provocative enough that it would make you go home and really think about your life and think about ways of changing your life to open up to all experience, and equal opportunities and, equal possibilities for all human beings. Not grouping people in groups so much, really thinking of people as individuals, all their beautiful resources of each individual person on the earth. The other branch is more what I've been following these years after my apocalyptic period, is to offer a kind of alternative template of the possibility of human behavior. So I consider that more, it's a response to the time, but maybe it's work that's not so specific to this time, in that maybe it's, or not so absolutely linked to the time, but it's more dealing with cycles that reoccur over and over and over again through history, through human history, and to offer another experience of this is the way that people could behave. Like, for example, Cellular Songs, which is the last piece that I did, the cast is 5 women. And I was very, very aware of that. The subtext of the piece was the way that we behaved with each other, which had to do with being very tender. It had to do with being very cooperative rather than competitive. It had to do with being very gentle rather than violent. It had to do with being very generous rather than greedy. And it's not spelled out. It's not like, it's not one-to-one, but you feel it. You really feel it underneath the material. The material is one thing, and this other whole situation of you could say, of love exists there for people to feed on as the audience members. And so that's a template of possibilities. I consider Indra's Net the third part of a trilogy that I'm working on, which has to do with the relationship of us to nature and the continuation of the planet. So the first one was called On Behalf of Nature. Second one is Cellular Songs. So it's digging deeper into what I call the fundamental motor of nature, of life, which is a cell, is, the fundamental unit of life. And now with this piece, Indra's Net, it's expanding to the universe, but we're going even deeper into the body. So I think just trying to make work like that, which has to do with our earth, the deep aspiration of the continuation of the earth and our awareness of the earth. And hopefully that would maybe soften people enough to be able to change their behavior in one way or another. This is all just, we're trying I think all of us are just trying our best to do something about this world in our own way, in the way that we can. And that's as much as we can do. And work on ourselves, because, I think that if you see in yourself your own patterns of, violence in your mind or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And you actually become aware of those patterns, and you even figure out little ways of changing those patterns, that resounds in the world. That's going to make you behave differently to the person that's next to you. That's going to make you behave differently to a person that doesn't even have the same beliefs that you do, that might be completely opposite in your political beliefs. Well, how do you deal with that? You've got to figure out a way, well, how do I, as Kwame Anthony Appiah said, who's a marvelous writer in the New York Times, he said, we have to learn how to sidle up to the people that, believe differently than we do. I like sidle up means that you're kind of going like this to them, like, well, how's your kid's baseball game doing? You find out these simple things that we have in common. And then, we might have a completely different political belief system, but there's one little moment, a little window of connection has happened. And I think that changes both people. So it's a slow process, but it's definitely worthwhile. And I think that, as I said, art or anything that you do that comes from love is worthwhile. And I do truly believe that it does change the world.
I keep the for connection and art being healing and vulnerability can somehow be a medicine. Thank you so much, Meredith, for this incredible dialogue. Keep well.
Thank you. You too. Keep well. Keep well, everyone. Keep well, everyone. Wear masks, please. It's really helpful. And actually, I will show you something really funny because I think someone from your festival said, please tell people to wear masks. Do you want to see a really funny mask?
Absolutely.
I mean, this is the funniest thing I ever saw in my life. Let me get it. So this is a mask. I just got it today. This is so crazy. This is a mask that was made by people that sing on Broadway. So it's called a singer's mask. To me, it's more like a horse feeding bag, but it makes it that you can sing because your mouth is not covered by the mask. You know, in other words, that you have. But I mean, is that the weird hoo hoo hoo? Isn't that crazy looking?
It's the animal.
You cannot breathe in it, so I don't know whether you would just faint if you sang one song. But the idea is that, see, my mouth is totally free. So, you know, the mouth is not, you know, the mask isn't pressing on my mouth. But I feel like I could have some oats. I could be a horse, and I could eat my lunch and. It's so weird looking. But I was thinking, you know, I saw it and I thought, well, you know, I want to rehearse with my groups and I want them to be safe. There's one problem, you can't breathe. That's the only problem. So I will take this off and sign off.
Thank you so much for bringing some touch of humor.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Me debruço, fito-me alguém corpo inteiro.